And it's another Friday, 12 noon Eastern time, and you know what that means. It's time for another episode of the CVC Home Service Success Network. This is produced by CVC Success Group, and we do this every week so we can share ideas, share concepts, share things that you can put to work in your own personal life and in your business to help you get to those dreams you got. It's a chaotic ride sometimes through life. You're going to face walls. You're going to face detours. You're going to face all kinds of things. And being able to get up and dust yourself off and put your big boy britches on and keep going sometimes is a difficult thing. Well, today we've got a special guest, and his name is Phillip Stoller. And Phillip is actually the CEO and the president of Sver Systems, but that's not why he's here. He's here because he has a background in assisting companies. He worked for an organization that I've been connected to. I've actually taught classes there called Alleron, which is in Dayton, Ohio. And some of you may have been there at some point. I know some people have taken their President's Club, President's classes. Other people have attended Sver Systems Summits theirs in the past where I had the privilege to speak. They got a fantastic stage. Got this giant TV screen that's behind you, and it's a really neat place to go to. It's a very inspirational place, and it gets a lot of background. So, Phillip, appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. Know you're a busy guy. Why don't we share with the folks a little bit about your background in coaching, consulting, and leadership training, sir?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jared. It's a pleasure to join you today and talk about, honestly, one of the things that I'm probably most passionate about. And I'll tell you why. I'll say leadership, and I'll say adopted Clay's attitude towards it that he taught me at Alleron, which is that it's important because when done well, it improves the quality of people's lives. And when done poorly, it generally speaking detracts from the quality of people's lives. And so I've always been passionate about it because I care about improving the quality of people's lives, which was Alleron's mission. To give you kind of a little bit of a background, I grew up on a farm, Indiana, and like most farm kids in Indiana that wanted to go to college, went to Purdue because it's in-state, and while I was there, studied psychology, intending to go to med school. Psychology was an easy way to sort of fill out your veto with the regular chemistry and biology and everything else and give you some flexibility. But I was very interested in how people perceive things and how people operate, how they form opinions and conclusions. And so that was kind of my background. I got married pretty early in college, and that changed med school to, I got to find a better way to support my young family and young wife. And ultimately that led me to start a business called Permacolumn. And Permacolumn pioneered a foundation system that we sold to pole builders, post frame builders. And ultimately that was kind of my, where I learned the most about how to run and operate a small business. I did that about 15 years. And then our family ended up selling that business. I sold to my family, and then the whole thing was sold to Morton Buildings. So I needed to kind of reinvent myself at that point. And like many business owners, I had sort of poured all myself into the business I started and had to kind of refigure out who I was outside of it. And that's where I found Alleron. Alleron was a big piece of me finding sort of a new sense of purpose, a new sense of meaning and direction. And I had the opportunity to go to Alleron and work there as a leadership coach, as a business advisor, as a facilitator. And that opportunity, learned a lot from the people that were there, including from Clay, who was there while I was there. So that's kind of brought me up to this space. John asked me to help turn Sver Systems into an employee-owned company. Back in 2020, I left the role at Alleron and have been working on Sver Systems as a leader, trying to build culture in an employee-owned organization.
Got you covered. So you mentioned Clay a couple times, and I know who Clay is, but some of our people may not. Can you tell everybody a little bit about our friend Clay, who has now passed away, who is the founder of Alleron?
Yes.
And, he was a poor boy. Tell a little bit about Clay and what all he did in his lifetime and why he started Alleron.
Yeah. So, well, Clay was an Ohio farm boy not an Indiana farm boy, but he, as a self-made man, certainly an American entrepreneurial success story, but from a bigger perspective, from a human perspective, a philanthropic success story. He joined IAMS when IAMS was, run by Mr. IAMS in a small building. And he tells the story of how he got hired by Mr. IAMS to be Mr. IAMS' kind of right-hand man by saying he went into a pole barn. Mr. IAMS was scattered and sitting behind a desk, asked Clay why you want to work there. And during the conversation, a rat scurried across the floor. He pulled out a rifle, shot the rat dead, and said, "Go ahead and continue." And from those humble beginnings, Clay turned that company, eventually bought Mr. Imes out and grew the company to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, sold it to Procter & Gamble for billions of dollars. And then really he and his wife, Mary, put themselves wholeheartedly into philanthropic work. Mary, a lot of times working with women and children, and Clay, a lot of times working with business owners. He saw businesses, especially small businesses, as tremendous engines of economic growth that could sort of create value and raise the quality of life in America through the way they did business and operate, if they were done well. And that was Clay's passion, is to help small business owners run businesses well so that they improve the quality of life. That was our mission. And if you asked sort of me what my job was each day, if you would ask Clay what he thought Philip's job was every day, he would have said Philip's job is to help businesses make life better for people. And that's what I was sort of blessed to be able to do.
One of the things I remember, Clay was actually did a virtual into a heat shield summit a Sver Systems Summit, heat shield summit that we had there. And Clay told the story about when he basically had to hire someone else to run the company for him.
Yeah.
The company had gotten beyond what he could do. It was above, as John Maxwell said, it was outside his lid, kind of like the McDonald brothers. That's what John Maxwell uses in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, is the McDonald brothers, where they had a lid over and they could never get there. And Clay was able to determine that he had that lid and made the changes. And that's how he became such a wealthy man when he retired, when he sold the company. Am I correct? Am I got that story right?
You're absolutely correct. He realized that he was very good as a visionary, but kind of maybe made messes as a person executing. And so he had the grace to bring in, and the good sense to bring in a president who essentially operated the day-to-day and executed. And he had to sort of step back from that level of sort of frontline tactical execution and trust it to someone else's hands. But if you spent any time with Clay at all, one of the things that I'll say, probably the first thing that you'll notice about him that's remarkable and undoubtedly contributed to his success is he's a man of remarkable humility. And I think it was that humility of being able to constantly see talent in others that he didn't have himself, or that supplemented the talents that he had, because he was a talented man, but he was able to see that in others and then empower others to use that to the full extent without getting in their way, which is a remarkable talent and an aspect of him that I'll always admire.
Got you covered. So anyway, Cheryl, what questions would you have for Philip today to get us started here? What's on your mind? Since I told you last week Philip was going to be our guest, what's bugging on you?
Well, we work with leadership, or try to, on a daily basis. And I see so many people that are literally fighting with it instead of approaching it. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that you would suggest to someone that's been in leadership for a while, or someone that's brand new getting into it? Where would you tell them to grasp on and start moving forward as you did when you were working with Alleron?
Well, I guess I'd point him to, where we pointed him in Alleron when we introduced the leadership class, which is to take a very deep look inward, as uncomfortable as that may be. One of the things that Clay taught and encouraged us to teach is that the problems that are in your business are more a reflection of the problems within you than problems outside of you. Meaning he recognized kind of early on that we had patterns of ways that we engaged with the world around us that sort of created the chaos that oftentimes leaders sort of attribute to others. And the maybe the best way to illustrate that is to say that, or to explain that, is to say that all of us as people are going through life trying to understand it better, trying to understand our businesses better, trying to understand our employees better, our customers better. And it's a lot of work. Looking inward is sort of recognizing the extent to which you don't understand those things, or you don't understand those things as they actually are. The extent to which you might be telling yourself that you know more about it based on assumptions than you know about it based on facts. And it's a challenging thing to do. And it takes that remarkable humility that I mentioned from Clay to do it well. The way I usually introduce it is I sort of give this concept out by a thought study. And if I have your permission, I'll do it with you here.
Certainly, you go ahead.
So I would ask people, and I'll ask you, Jerry and Cheryl, if you were driving to work, be honest, because it only works if you're honest. All this stuff only works if you're honest, by the way. You're driving to work and somebody cut you off, made you slam on the brakes interstate, almost caused a wreck. They zoom off. What would you do?
What would I do?
Be honest.
I'll be honest with you. At my age, I just let them go. Life is too short to chase someone down in this day and time, and it's also too dangerous. What difference does it make? You did get hurt, just let them go ahead. In fact, it happened to us just a few days ago. We were going down the highway, and all of a sudden, we were sitting at an intersection, stoplight, and here comes a car like zoom right around us that we caught up to the next stoplight. And it's like, man, you accomplished a lot in life. But that's my choice. Cheryl, what's yours?
Well, that's always been my choice, which was not yours for years. Yeah, Jerry used to have a might bit more temper than he does now, but yeah, it sets off a stressor in most people, and the only one that's going to get a non-benefit from it's yourself. I mean, whatever, if you chase them down, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I've asked that question to, I was going to say hundreds, but probably the answer is more thousands of people while I was at Alleron. And your response is one of two that was typical, both of yours, but much less typical. Typically, I got two things. One of them was to do what you did, was just to sort of shrug it off, or what you said, how you would react. And the other was very aggressive, very angry. You know, generally speaking, it involved, you know, a single finger salute or something like that. Maybe words we shouldn't say on your podcast. Anger, right? Anger based on the way the world was around them. Next thing I would do, though, so let's leave that. And I would say this: how would you respond to this group? And I'm going to give you one more piece of information. How would you respond if you knew just one thing that you didn't know the first time, and that was that person in the car had just received a phone call from his spouse who was at the hospital with their teenage daughter who had just been in a catastrophic accident? How would you respond then?
The same way I just did, because it would have been irregardless. I would have been looking at, to be honest, I'd be looking at my own safety. Would I have concern for that person? Yes. But at the same time, I would have the same exact reaction. Hey, let the guy go. Let the woman go. It's not worth having a road rage incident over. It's really not.
Yeah. Cheryl?
I would move. You're talking about them being in another car, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I'd pull over, let the man by, and just pray he gets there in time.
Yeah. And Cheryl, that is what I heard most often. Not only would I let it go, but there would be compassion, there would be spiritual advocacy, there'd be thoughts of goodwill, from as extreme as anger and maybe a couple of choice words to literally prayers based on one piece of information. And I get that that's hypothetical, but it's meant to illustrate what I was just telling you is the extent to which, as leaders, we are constantly being bombarded with information all the time. We get a word from a salesperson about a relationship in the field, or technical says there's this kind of thing going on with a product, or whatever, banker saying this or board member saying that. And a lot of times we take that information and quickly turn it into a narrative within ourselves, a story about what's going on. In the case of the guy in the car, maybe the first story that went to the anger is, what a jerk. This guy thinks he's better than me. His time's more important. What the world? That might lead to the coarse words, right? And the other side is, oh my goodness, this man's family is suffering. He needs to get there and be there. Bigger story, but it's a bigger story with almost the same information, just one little extra piece. And I told people, generally speaking, as leaders, the best way to view our ability to perceive information and then eventually act on it is that the universe never gives you full pictures. It gives you a couple pieces of a puzzle. The problem with it is that we a lot of times think that we're looking at the full picture when we're only looking at a few pieces of the puzzle. And I've illustrated this to people to say this is kind of the way we're built, because our brains have to take shortcuts. There's too much coming at us. But learning when your brain is taking a shortcut that gets you to the truth quicker versus gets you to a made-up story is really important. Because if you're constantly operating and engaging with your team, with your customers, based on made-up stories, not reality, you are going to get resistance, because the people around you are going to say, this guy's clueless. He must live in a different world, right? The way he looks at things, the things he says, the things he does. I mean, what's going on here? It looks almost crazy, right? Because we're looking at a couple pieces and not the whole picture. And so a lot of our leadership training at the beginning was involved in helping people slow down and become more aware of what aspects of the picture that they're looking at as a business leader is true information and how much of it's assumption. And then beyond that, how much of that assumption is accurate. One more thing I'll tell you, which illustrates this. This is maybe the pre-med student part of me talking, but it illustrates the extent to which we are unaware of this. I'll say this. Most people don't know that you walk around life constantly with a part of your field of view that is made up. There's a part of what you're seeing right now that isn't real. And the explanation of it is, and it candidly, we won't do it, but you can prove this to yourself if you want to by taking a piece of white paper, putting a black dot on the middle of it, closing one eye and going like this, and eventually the black dot disappears. The reason that is because your eye has an area where it is literally blind. It's where the optic nerve connects with it. And your brain is so good at filling in missing information that throughout your life, it's been telling you stuff that's there and you didn't even know it. And that's fact. That's how good our brains are at sort of putting missing pieces of the puzzle on the table for us. It's shocking, but it's true. And so stepping back from that, it sounds simple, but it's one of the most challenging things for leaders to become good at. Because when you're under the gun, you want to charge, you want to move through, not slow down, step back, right?
Yeah. So Philip, you've been around home services, specifically the chimney service industry, for about 5 years now, which means you've been to shows, you've met people, you've probably been involved in settling disagreements between you as a manufacturer, as a supplier, and customers, and you've had a lot of interactions at this point. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the largest weakness overall in the home service managers, and why they're not able to establish the culture that they're looking for in their companies? What is the issue? Do they need to look inside themselves? Is it their style? What is the leading leadership weakness you've observed in your time in this industry?
They need to look inside themselves first. But where this typically shows up in interpersonal interaction is it undermines their ability to communicate effectively. It goes back to that, what I was telling you. If I'm acting on two pieces of the puzzle and other people see more, they're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm living in a different world, because kind of I am living in a different world, right? My perception becomes my reality, but my reality is based on different perceptions than the people around me. I would say that the biggest challenge that I've seen for leaders in this industry is learning how to communicate, learning how to slow down so that they can actually see the world more accurately as it is. It's honestly, and I don't mean that to be judgmental, it's honestly also my biggest challenge as a leader. It's hard for me as well when I'm under pressure, even though I used to teach this stuff, to sort of practice it as well as I'd like, to slow down and to be better at communicating. Because most of the time as a leader, our perceptions are formed by the things that people are telling us. So they're going to be giving us messages. It's going to be a conversation. And in the conversation, they're telling us about a problem. They're telling us about, something that they're trying to accomplish or whatever. And our ability to see the picture as it is going to be based very much on our ability to listen, very much on our ability to have successful communication so that we can understand the world the way it is and the way that the people around us see it, so that we can take action based on an accurate perception.
And when people think of coaching, to be honest with you, I think most of them think like a sports team coach. I think when you say coaching, I mean, a lot of times it was just this earlier this week, Cheryl and I were at a local restaurant and we were sitting at a bar where we usually sit at the front. It's easier to get served there. So anyway, guy says, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a coach." And he looks at me like, "What do you coach?" And I said, "Well, I'm a business coach. I work with business owners in home services around the country. It's what I do." But what is that? I help them through their challenges. But as I think of this, I think of significant coaches, and there are a lot of significant coaches, but two that come to mind are Vince Lombardi and Joe Gibbs. Definitely two different leadership styles, if ever there was. And Joe Gibbs has been able to move from a football coach and go and owns a very successful NASCAR team now. They're based 20 miles, 15 miles from where we're sitting. He has 4 drivers. And I listened to a story the other day about Joe Gibbs and how he came in one day and asked his 4 drivers the question, "Why did you not win Sunday?" He asked each of them that question. And then the next question he asked was, "What do we have to do as a team to get you to win on Sunday?" In other words, he wasn't blaming them. He looked at it, how the team can support you. Vince Lombardi, it was more of, he was a hard-nosed coach. He was going to drive you for all it was worth. And in today's world, that doesn't work any longer with today's workers, I don't think. But that's there. What do you think of the process that I just talked about with Joe Gibbs?
I think it's a great one, right? I need to understand what truly was the roadblock, what truly was the obstacle, what this team can work on if we want to perform better as a team. And honestly, it's the alternative to blame shifting, right? It's pointing the finger and saying, you should have done this, you should have done that. Well, maybe you know that. Your mind's going to tell you that you really think you know that. But his approach is exactly what I'm talking about. Rather than going there under pressure and the frustration of a loss, he slowed down, he stepped back, and he told himself, I may not know everything I need to know as a leader to get a better result. No matter how I feel, no matter how frustrated I am, no matter what I think I know the solution is, I'm going to be humble enough and I'm going to be intentional enough that I'm going to ask the people closest to the problem what they think the solution is. That's a concept that's based in Lean too, because Lean teaches us if you want to be a better operator, you got to ask the people closest to the problem for what they believe the solution is, because they understand it more accurately than anyone else. For instance, if I got a labeling machine on our line, labeling 5-gallon buckets, and it's broken, I could go in there and start raising a ruckus. I don't know much about that labeling machine. The alternative to that would be to go in there and ask our operator, Clint, this isn't working too good. What do you need? What's going wrong? What do you need in terms of resources to fix it? Because he knows that machine inside and out. It's closest to the problem, also probably closest to the solution. I'd say you're talking about a guy who understands that and is willing to do what it takes to leverage that knowledge, that inside knowledge of the person closest to the problem.
Very much so. So Cheryl, what's the next question on your list there? I know you got some questions for Phillip.
Well, first a comment. You mentioned communication. That's what I always preach on. Nobody has enough communication.
Yeah.
And to me, the communication is not the verbal part of it, it's the listening part of it.
Mhm.
So, and there is my question.
Yeah.
How do you work with a person to improve their listening? Because if they're listening just to answer a quick question, that's not where we need them. We need them to listen to what the person's saying and also listen to what they're not saying. So how do
Yeah.
you get them there?
Yeah, so good. And the way you're describing it is it's very familiar or similar to the way Alleron described it in terms of different levels of listening. But I would step back from it to begin with and say, to understand the point of listening, you may want to step back and say, what is the point or definition of successful communication? What is communication? What is the goal of it? Because listening is a part of communication, but it's not all of it. And what I would tell people, the best way to sort of visualize in your head the goal of communication is to sort of recognize that anytime two people come together to talk, they're bringing a pool of understanding or meaning. I think the world is this. Think of it as a circle. This is my understanding. This circle's here. But the other person has a pool of understanding. Their circle's here. So my understanding, your understanding. Unsuccessful communication means they stay separate. My understanding, your understanding, they don't start coming closer together. There's no overlap. There's no circle where in the middle there's a sliver where we share understanding. And my understanding and your understanding becomes our understanding, our shared understanding, our shared pool of information that we both agree to, that we both see and recognize. And when you think about moving those circles together, there's the art and the practice of bringing the other person's understanding more into your view. And then there's the art and practice of bringing your understanding more into theirs. I call those directional arrows advocacy and inquiry. If I'm good at advocating, I'm good at sharing my understanding. That's talking, that's explaining, that's coaching, it's demonstrating. But the other side is I also need to be good at understanding yours, which is inquiry. It's active listening, it's active questions, it's empowering questions, right? And when a leader becomes good at both, the general result is that our understanding sliver becomes a bigger pie. That's the goal in my world, in terms of the way I would define it, of communication. If I'm sitting down, for instance, with my CFO and we're forming a budget, I need to be very good at understanding her meaning. Going back to that skilled operator closest to the problem, she's closer to the problem of coming up with a budget that's going to work. And so if I want to see the world as it is, I need to have enough humility to say her understanding of the budget is generally speaking more detailed, more in focus than mine. And so I've got to be really good at inquiry. So I take on more of that. Listening is one of the most important pieces of inquiry. Speaking is one of the most important pieces of advocacy. What I would say I've seen in this industry, but not just the industry and leaders in general, but definitely in our industry, is that a lot of leaders focus on advocacy. They focus at being good at expressing their ideas or their judgments about the way the world is, their assumptions. They're good at advocating for their brands, their products, their process, their people. Not very good at inquiry, not very good at trying to make sure they understand. And that's true of all of us. It's generally speaking the way we're wired. We're sort of more naturally able to advocate well than inquire well, which is what, as a coach, I spend a lot of time working on, teaching specific skills that help people sort of take that level of listening up. Now, you talked about listening to what's there and what's not there. The goal of being better at inquiry is being able to take your ability to listen effectively up. Again, so you see the world more as the skilled operator, the person close to the problem sees it. We talked about 3 different levels of listening that are very common. We called level 1 subjective, level 2 objective, and level 3 intuitive. And I'll describe them as this, and I maybe demonstrate again if you guys want to do a little thought experiment. Subjective is listening with a sole intent of responding. I'm only listening in as much as is required so that I can start speaking. And if you think about advocacy and inquiry, which one is that? Maybe more advocacy. Even though you're listening, it's almost more about me being able to say what I want to say and finding a way to say it than it is about truly understanding the other world. Then you go up to level. Objective is listening, but listening just for what's being said. Very literal, very black and white. I am truly interested in what the person's saying, but I'm just hearing what's said. And then it goes to share what you were talking about, which is also listening to what's not being said, which is the intuitive listening, where you're hearing both the spoken word and the things that are behind it. A lot of communications expert will say that far more what's communicated is outside of the black and white letters, the words, some of them hugely more, like 90% more, the inflection, the tone, the innuendo. And so at that intuitive level, you're able to see and hear all of that or more of that. Right.
And, Philip, I want to echo what you're saying, because lack of a skill of listening, I feel like, is one of the major issues of so many things going on in this world. In your contact with your spouse, your conversations with your children, with your parents, with your employees, with customers. And it also transpires across to your ability to make sales.
Yeah.
I phrase it like, you've got to be able to listen to understand. You got to understand there's things there that are in their minds, but often we don't simply listen. And by listening, you're showing the ultimate respect to people, not interrupting them. So I'm dead on the money. Where you're at, you're dead on the money with what you're saying there.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is, here's your opportunity at this point, Philip, to speak to our community. Our community is the people that are in the home service industries. Many of them are in the chimney service industry. Many of them are your customers. They're my clients. They're what we work with. So what would be the advice you would give to these people to become a better listener, which is going to build their culture? It's going to build retainage of employees. They're not going to be as apt to leave if there's good leadership. They say people quit jobs because of leadership, not because of compensation. So what's your words of wisdom you would share on this medium today with us, Philip?
Yeah. No, well, first, I agree. Alleron and I used to say people quit their boss, not their job. Right. So when a person leaves, they're quitting you. They're firing you as a leader. And they're essentially interviewing and determining who else they want to employ as a leader in their lives, right? And so it's another way of thinking about it. When they leave, we just got fired. And if we're being honest with ourselves as a leader, it's because we didn't lead them in a way that provided them what they were looking for. And they're looking for someone else who will, right? Someone else who's able to provide what they need as a person with their own, agenda, with their own goals, with their own dreams, their own family. And that's not to take you down a road of saying, well, I must suck, but it's to say, let's be honest about it. There was a reason. There was a reason they fired me as a leader and they chose someone else. You asked about a tip. Here's the tip that I would say I would do the first and the most religiously is anytime you're in a tense conversation, anytime you're in a conversation where the stakes are high, when you hear a message and you feel that emotional response, wherever you feel it, whether it's anger, your chest gets tight, your temple gets stretched, whatever it is, the moment you feel that, teach yourself that's a cue to slow down. And slow down by taking a deep breath. The moment you feel that, just take a deep breath. There's no rush. You got time for this conversation. Whether the conversation takes 2 minutes or 10 minutes, it'll still be okay. So take a deep breath. And after that deep breath, ask yourself, okay, what about this situation do I not understand? What do I not know? Think about the puzzle. Ask yourself which pieces of the picture that I think I see are real pieces and which ones are assumptions. Which ones are I'm just telling myself. I'm making them up. I'm assuming I know, even though I don't, right? And use that pause, that self-reflection to get curious as opposed to angry or scared or whatever else emotion that's flooding you and candidly probably contributing to a way of engaging with people that will lead them to firing you as a leader. Because when we engage in fear, anger, distrust, that's why people fire us, right? But get curious. So ask yourself, what do I not know? What's important to know that I'm assuming? What am I assuming? And rather than coming back with advocacy, meaning, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, this is what's wrong, blah, 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 come back with inquiry, come back with questions. based on what you don't know. So if you're hearing a message about, a customer, let's say, moving to your competitor, and your salesperson's telling you, rather than going, well, you should have done this, you should have done that, you should have, go to, what do I not know? Maybe say, Mr. Salesperson, why do you think that happened? What could we do better? What ways do you need me to empower you to get to a different outcome? Similar to the NASCAR coach that you were talking about, Jerry. So pause, take a deep breath, get curious, ask questions.
Got you. Cheryl, anything you want to ask Phillip before we get out of this?
Oh, we could take this down more rabbit holes than I can think of, but I've enjoyed it, Phil. You've good information. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Phillip, we had one person had a question. I'm going to put it on the screen, but this is from Tom Wright, who's probably a Sver Systems customer up in near Asheville, North Carolina. But he's asking, in consideration of style, do you see negative or positive by either? Setting absolute expectations versus asking for options concerning how to get the objective completed on time and budget. And he's referring strictly into a sweep install business. So what do you see? Asking options or setting the absolute expectations? What's the better way to lead?
It's such a good question. And it speaks to a nuance, right? It speaks to there's never a one size fits all for everything. There are times when leaders have to advocate. And I wouldn't want anyone to walk away from this thinking the only way you lead in a business is just by always asking questions. It's not. But think about where it is where leaders need to advocate the most to sort of figure out when to use either style. Because you need to be, as an effective leader, good at both advocacy and inquiry, but you don't want to overuse advocacy. It's like, you don't want to be the guy that's got a hammer in his hands so everything looks like a nail. You need a screwdriver too, and you need to see nails for nails and screws for screws. So you use the right tool, so to speak, whether it's advocacy or inquiry. Leaders are absolutely going to have to be the moral center of their organization. Leaders are absolutely going to have to advocate for these things. They are going to be the champion of vision. They're going to be the champion of telling people about purpose, why we do what we do here, about mission and about values. And they're going to have to be very good at advocating for that. Very good at telling people what they think is possible. Very good at giving people hope where there's hopelessness. Very good at saying there's still a way. There's still a way through this, right? And this is the way. This is how we get there. They're going to be very important at setting sort of the non-negotiables, sort of the cultural guidelines, the rails through which we operate. But that's big picture. That's visionary. What we're talking about here in terms of using more inquiry is really more the tactical, day-to-day, the things that cause frustrations each day that maybe hit you by surprise.
Okay. Got you covered. Well, brother, first of all, I want to thank you for taking some time with us today. I think you've shared some really great concepts, really great things. And if you've listened to this, take what Phillip has shared with you to heart. How good are you actually listening? Do you understand? I think you had a big one. People quit bosses. They don't quit jobs. They don't quit because of compensation. So many times you look at it. Sometimes I wonder, does this person have a charisma above others or what is it? But when you look deep inside, you can tell it's a person that listens. It's a person that cares. But if you're going to build a successful business, you got to have the team. And if you don't have the team, more than likely, you're never going to reach your dream. That's the way it is. So again, Phillip, appreciate you joining us today. This is Jerry Eisenhower. We're CVC Success Group. We are proud, we're honored, we're privileged to have you with us every week. And next week, Cheryl, we got a returning guest next week. Brandy Biswell is going to be back with us and going to be doing an interview with Brandy, who's a former member of our team, who is now into the nursing world and messing with her pond. I keep expecting her to get snake bit in that pond one day swimming around it. But appreciate you joining us today. Let us know here at CVC Success Group how we can help you get to your business dreams. That's what we're here for. And we look forward to hearing from you if we can assist you in that journey. Have a fantastic week and a fantastic